If we could all just have a little UCF energy in our lives. That's what I'm going to open with here. I understand that there's some skepticism about what this league is going to be. In fact, I just saw the tweet from somebody saying, like, man, I'm skeptical about this. Like, we're losing the big games that we play every year, games against Oklahoma and Texas. That sucks. It does. Like, it's fun to beat those teams. It's fun to play those games. It's fun to have the idea of those games on the schedule. But I will remind you, UCF went undefeated in 2017, and they have played in 3 New Year's 6 bowl games in the last, since 2013. That's what, 8 years? They've been pretty good. That's better than what has happened around here. So let's be a little bit careful where we're throwing stones. Cincinnati is ranked in the top 10 right now. BYU went 11-1 last year, and they were inside the top 10 for a minute. So, like, there will still be some opportunities for big games, and I think these schools are very, very committed to taking advantage of all of the extra resources that they do have. And one of the best points I think that Kellis made the whole time when he was here in the first hour there is, like, these are the best schools that were available in terms of being like sleeping giants. Like, he called Houston a sleeping giant, being in such a big city. There's so much recruiting there. It's such a hotbed for recruiting. And obviously being in the state of Texas, and one thing that's always held them back is competing with all these other schools in the state of Texas that are not, or that were in Power 5 leagues. Well, they were not. Well, that problem has now been remedied. So how much does that actually help a school like that? I think there is reason to believe in what these schools can become. In fact, I even saw a little bit of discussion yesterday about, like, oh, crap, what did we just do? Like, did we just enable UCF to launch itself into superstardom? Did we just enable Houston to launch itself up a couple other levels? And, like, in the next round of conference realignment, maybe somebody's there wanting to poach these schools instead of the other 8 in the Big 12 because we just elevated all these places in recruiting-rich territories, gave them more resources, and gave them more status. I mean, that's a risk that you have to take. That was an interesting take because most people right now are focusing on the opposite side of that. Like, is this enough? It's not going to replace the brand value of Texas and Oklahoma, et cetera, but winning fixes everything. And if UCF continues to win the way that they have, and they're doing it now at a slightly elevated level, that is going to play. That is going to play. And they already do have somewhat of a national name for themselves based on what they've done over the last 8 years. So, look, I'm just saying, don't discount the potential here for these schools to really jump into the next level of what they can be and start to realize some more potential. I used the NFL draft analogy yesterday of, like, you're taking the best athletes available and you have to project based on the potential that these schools do have. And I will double down on that statement again here today. You are projecting, but you can nurture and grow these schools into something better. And I'm unconvinced that they wouldn't necessarily 10 years down the road be better than most of the 8 that are already here in the Big 12 right now. I think there's every possibility of that happening. So I think it's clear that the Big 12 did get better today. Absolutely clear. And when I say we should bring some UCF energy to the table, it's because of what it is that we heard from UCF today. I'm going to start with this. This is UCF's athletic director taking the podium for the first time at the Zoom press conference, and just listen to this energy as he's walking up to the podium.
What's wrong with everybody? Come on! Celebrate! Come on, this is great. Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. Well, I'd just like to thank the media first for keeping this such a secret. Thank you for all your hard work and not trying to get the scoop.
Nice little joke and a hat tip to the media there as well. My button never works when I try and turn that damn audio off. I'm sorry. But listen to the energy there. And I know that seems silly and trivial that I'm playing that and being like, oh, let's all get some UCF energy in our lives. And I do say that, like, half in jest, but also half serious. Like, UCF means business. That's a school that's been fighting for itself at the Power 5 / just wanting to be at the big boy table in college football and really, really fighting for their spot. I mean, think back to 2017. I know that got panned as kind of a joke at the time that they were fighting to consider themselves national champions, being the only unbeaten team in 2017, but there is, I think, some legitimacy to the effort there that they put into that. They really believe that they belong. They do. And it's a massive school with a 70,000 enrollment. They have a football stadium that can expand up to 65,000 people. They're clearly maneuvering toward that right now. And they are going to be aggressive in trying to make themselves better. They have already, one of the first things that happened in that press conference for UCF today was that they announced they've already taken out a new line of credit with the university for the athletic department to ready themselves to pay whatever it is that they're going to have to pay to get out of the ACC and into the Big 12. Now, as far as the specifics there, they didn't get into what any of the negotiations are, what they expect to have to pay. They would only say, like, look, it's a $10 million price tag to get out of the AAC by 27 months, and then it's another 2.5 in escrow to get into the Big 12. We know it's going to take more money than that because they're going to try and get out sooner of the AAC. But they've already taken out that line of credit, and then they immediately launched a social media campaign to try and solicit donations from their donors, from their alums, by asking for $12 a month for the next year. It was like 12 for 12. And they're pitching it as, hey, for the future of UCF athletics, we're joining the Big 12. Donate $12 a month. That, to me, is an aggressive move and one that I like because think about it. If you have 70,000 students, how many alums do you have? And a lot of them probably are very excited. You've got the athletic director running up there screaming and shouting as he gets to the podium. That's how fired up they are to be now in a Power 5 conference. And they're going to push that onto their alums and their fans, which you would figure the fan base is pretty big. So they're going to make a push. They're going to go all in on this. And I think there is something to that. I mean, their coach right now is Gus Malzahn. Say what you will about his time at Auburn, but like that's a guy that coached in a national championship game at Auburn. And he's now the head coach at UCF. Their previous coach, I know, is a joke and a punchline now in Scott Frost, but he's the one that led them to an unbeaten season. So, like, there's a commitment there at UCF. And I just would not discount them really launching themselves to the next level. Also, take into account this. I mean, I felt like I learned a lot about UCF today. They have only been a school, like the first class at UCF didn't take place until 1968. They didn't join FBS football until 1996. So it's still young. And back to that NFL draft analogy. What do you always talk about and want in the draft? You want younger players. I sat behind the same very microphone and told you about Byron Pringle, what's that been, 4 years ago now? About why he was leaving, and a big part of why he was leaving early is because his clock was ticking because he was going to be 25 by the time the NFL draft took place, and you want younger players than that. The view on the NFL is like, if you're too old, you don't have as much potential, there's already a lot of mileage on there, you don't have as much upside. Well, relative to the rest of the schools left behind in the Big 12, I mean, we're talking about a lot of these Big 8 original schools playing football together since way back in like the 1800s, early 1900s. UCF didn't join what we now recognize as FBS football until 1996. They have way more upside because they're just much younger. They have not had time to nurture the tradition and culture nearly as long as all of these other places. So don't sleep on what the potential of this league is. I'm not saying it's going to be the SEC. I'm not saying that it's going to be the Big Ten. Those schools are going to be out of reach, but let's be honest. Those leagues have been out of reach already. There's already a significant monetary gap between the Big Ten, which is already north of $50 million per year payout. There was already a double-digit difference in what Nebraska makes and what K-State makes a year in terms of revenue from their conference. So that gap already existed. The gap with the SEC already existed, and it's just getting bigger with the TV deal that they had already signed with ESPN for $3 billion. That was always going to be there. But you can absolutely remain competitive with the Pac-12 and the ACC. Particularly if Clemson ever starts to slip at all. You can be really competitive with the ACC here. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm relieved and cautiously optimistic. Relieved because for now, the Big 12 has kicked the can down the road on blowing up, on leaving everybody homeless and looking for a place to go. They've kicked it down the road a little ways because of these additions. And Bob Bowlesby today, by the way, did not close the door on expanding further. So it may not be done yet which would give you a little bit more breathing room, even if a school or two wound up leaving at some point. You've kicked the can down the road. There's relief for me from that standpoint. Looking at how well UCF, Cincy, BYU have all performed, I'll leave Houston out of it outside of the one season with Tom Herman. But at least 3 of the 4 have really, really had nice football history in the last 10 years. I think it'll be a fun league. I think there is a lot of potential for these athletes, quote unquote, to really blossom with their upside. And it at least right now gives you a home for a little while. Kicks the can down the road. You're not going to have to sweat out through this football season extinction at the Power 5-ish level.